study techniques. We all have our own study techniques that we rely on. Some of us rely on reading the material over and over. Some of us just highlight everything. Others love writing flashcards, but lately there have been a bunch of study and productivity gurus showing up on YouTube, and I want to test if their techniques really work. What's up? Welcome to the channel. I'm Jack Amaral. I am a second-year law student, and today I'm going to go over and review Ali Abdaal's video of his Essay Memorization Framework. Let's see if it really works for everyone, including law students. So let's hop into his video and we'll check it out.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Ali. I'm a junior doctor working in Cambridge, and in this video I'm going to share with you the Essay Memorization Framework that I used when I was in my third year at Cambridge University. That was the year in which I was studying psychology, and I actually ended up winning the prize for best exam performance in the year group.
Ooh, best exam performance. I want that.
And I pretty much exclusively attribute that to this essay memorization framework. This method should work for most essay-based subjects, but even if your subject isn't essay-based, I hope you might still find this video useful and pick up a few tips and techniques along the way. And of course, everything I'm going to mention is going to be linked in timestamps in the video description and in a pinned comment, so you can skip around the video if you feel like it. Let's just jump into it.
For those of you in law school, it is pretty much 100% essay-based. So they give you a question for the final exam, and you have to write an essay about it, applying all the laws that you think apply. So this should help.
So there are basically two stages to this method. The first stage is the creation stage, and the second stage is the memorization stage. So in the creation stage, the objective is to create first-class essay plans for every conceivable essay title that they could throw at us in the exam. And in the memorization stage, we're going to be committing all of these essay plans to memory by systematically using active recall, spaced repetition, spider diagrams, and flashcards. The idea is that by the time the exam rolls around, you'll have memorized so many...
Alright, so I already have an issue. I'm supposed to have a hypo for every single possible essay they could throw at me. That already sounds almost impossible, but let's see what he says.
Essay plans that a lot of them will just come up in the exam anyway because you've predicted the titles and you'll just be able to regurgitate stuff from your brain onto the paper. But even if stuff comes up that you haven't memorized, you'll know so much about the subject and you'll have so many content blocks in your head that you'll be able to generate a first-class essay from scratch. So that was a general overview. Let's now talk about the two components, the creation stage and the memorization stage in turn. So the broad objective of the creation stage is to create a large number of really good essay plans that you can then memorize in the memorization stage and regurgitate onto paper during your exam. Now, it's probably beyond the scope of this video for me to teach you how to write a good essay, and probably also beyond the scope of my own expertise, but I will share some tips on three main questions, and that's firstly, how you decide what essay titles to pick, secondly, how you plan the essay, and thirdly, how you make sure your essay plan is really good. So let's deal with those in turn. So firstly, how do we decide what essays we're going to prepare? The objective here is to scope the subject and find essay titles that cover the entire breadth of the syllabus. Now, the easiest way to do this is to look at past papers and look at whatever past papers you have available and see what essays have come up in the past, and you start off with those, and then once you've planned out those...
Alright, this is a great point. Yeah, you want to have old papers, old tests. Go talk to your professor. Go to the library, ask the librarian if they have old tests. These are super helpful. That it's definitely going to increase your grade just by having access to the old tests.
And at those essays, you'll know enough about that subject in particular that you'll be able to put yourself in the shoes of examiners and start thinking, okay, what's a good essay title that I've not yet asked about? If you haven't got past papers available, then I'm very sorry to hear that. You're just going to have to put yourself into the examiner's shoes from the get-go, or you can actually go to your teacher, your professor, your lecturer, whatever, and say, hey, what's the sort of essays that might come up in the exam? What are some things I should be thinking about? So having made a list of what essays we're going to plan, we then need to actually plan those essays. And this is the fun part. This is the part that actually requires doing some cognitive labor. So the way I would do this is that I'd give myself 1 day per essay plan. So in the first term of uni, I was a slacker. I only made like 5 essay plans. In the second term, I made about 10. And then in the Easter holidays, I really ramped it up and made about 35 different ones.
35 different essay plans. That sounds so awful to do. I don't know if it works. It seems to for him. Maybe this is something I have to try.
And the way I'd do it is that I'd start off with a question. So for example, do animals have a theory of mind? And then I would use Google to get as much information as I can about that particular question. I would ignore the lecture notes initially, and I would ignore the recommended reading. I'd start off with Google because Google is like a really good way to find the answer to any question that you want. And often I'd be linked to review articles.
Nope, I'm gonna stop it. Do not start on Google for law school. You're gonna wanna look at your outlines. You're gonna wanna look at what the professor has said and the notes and possibly outlines that they have given you. Do not start with Google, because if you go in to a test and you are reciting from Google and not the actual laws that matter that you've learned in that class, you're gonna get an F.
And review papers, and I'd be reading through those review papers. Oftentimes the review paper would directly answer the question, in which case I've pretty much got my essay, I just need to turn it into my own words. But a lot of the time I'd be following references from the review paper. And then once I'd created my essay plan, I would then look at the lecture notes and the recommended reading. And this meant that a lot of my material was hopefully more original than everyone else's, because most other students would have built their essays based around the lecture notes, whereas I was building my essays on a random Google search. So I would start off.
So this is a little different. In law school, you're not going to want to necessarily stand out. You don't want to be super original in your essays, your exam essays, because you want to be able to hit every single point. So creativity doesn't matter. You want to go in. I've seen the grading list for professors. They just have a list of things that you need to hit. And if you hit it, you get the points. And if you don't get the points. So you want to know the law. You want to understand how it applies. And you really want to be able to hit every single point. So law school tests are all about identifying the issues. They're issue-based. You got to identify the issues, say what they are, say the rules that apply, say how they apply, and what the conclusion is. But let's keep going.
Pretty much written it out based on our research document, and we've only given ourselves one day to do this because of Parkinson's law. That work expands to fill the time we allocate to it.
I do like the use of Parkinson's law, very 4-hour work week of them.
But how do we make the essay plan actually good? A lot of things go into a good essay plan, but in my opinion, there are 3 things that count. Number 1, structure. Number 2, actually answering the question. And number 3, having a bit of flair, a bit of spice that you're sprinkling in your
I agree with all 3 of those, except for the last. You don't need flair.
Essay plan. And I think the introduction is the most important part of the essay, because in the introduction, you can signal to the examiner that you're doing all 3 of these things. And
I also completely disagree with that, because in law school, if you just have a long introduction that has a bunch of flair, that doesn't tell you anything. That doesn't mean you hit any of the points that the professor is looking for you to hit. Remember, you need to hit those points, you need to identify all the issues and how they apply. Not just flair, not just originality, but you need to go through it and do all of that.
When the examiner's marking your paper, they're probably really bored, they've read hundreds of these scripts already. You want to hit them with like a really legit introduction. So obviously, you know, there are entire university courses and entire books and stuff devoted to the art of writing a good essay. I don't personally think I'm very good at writing an essay, but I think I'm pretty good at using Google effectively and copying and pasting stuff into a research Word document and then turning it into fairly legit sounding prose. And then I think I'm pretty good at systematically memorizing all that information.
That is exactly right. You do not have to be a great writer to do well. In fact, so many people go to law school, they're like, oh, I was such a good writer in college and high school, I'm going to do really well, and they end up doing horribly. I've actually seen if you have some sort of science degree or something like that, you tend to do better. So you don't have to be a great writer to do well.
Just a bit further. But now let's talk about stage 2 of the process, the memorization stage. Okay, so by this point we've got a load of really good essay plans that we have created in Word documents. Now the objective in the memorization stage is to upload all of those essay plans to our brain so that we can then regurgitate them in the exam. And we're going to do this using 3 main techniques. Number 1, Anki flashcards. Number 2, spider diagrams. And number 3, a retrospective revision timetable. So again, let's talk about these in turn. So firstly, Anki. And I've basically used Anki flashcards to memorize every paragraph in every essay plan.
That sounds so hard, to memorize every paragraph in every essay plan. Okay, I have tried Anki before, and I don't know how to use it. It makes no sense to me. Please, Ali, teach me. Please teach me how to use Anki. I use the Quizlet. Quizlet works just fine for me, but how is Anki any special? How is it special? Please, I need to know. But let's keep going.
And this might seem a bit overkill, but it worked for me. So what I've done is, as you can see, I've got keywords on the front of the card like Bauer 1984, or Damisch et al. 2006, or Ellis et al. 1997, or short-term versus long-term memory introduction. I've even put the introduction into an Anki flashcard. And then over time, I'll memorize these, because pretty much anything that goes into my Anki flashcards, because during the exam term, I'm going through my flashcards every single day and I'm doing Anki's spaced repetition algorithm, I just know that anything that's in my Anki is just going to get uploaded to my brain with a small amount of effort put in by me to actually memorize this stuff. So yeah, I've got the keywords and I've got the content. So basically, if I've put, you know, a paper, Russell and Fair 1987, I'm describing in the Anki flashcard what that paper shows, which means that overall I create these blocks of content that every Anki flashcard is its own little block, and that block can slot into my essay that I've planned. But also, if a weird essay comes up that I haven't explicitly planned, I still have all these blocks of knowledge in my head. And that means if there is a paper that's relevant, I'll know what it is, I'll know what the reference is, I'll know what the content is, I'll know how to describe the experiment, and I'll just be able to put it into even new essays that I'm writing on the spot in the exam. So that's all well and good, but obviously knowing Tversky and Kahneman experiment from 1974 or Musweiler and Strack from 2000, those things aren't that helpful unless you can also associate them with their own essays, and that's where the spider diagrams come in. Alright, so the second prong of the memorization stage of the Essay Memorization Framework involves spider diagrams.
Spider diagrams.
Is the book that I made all my spider
Haven't
diagrams
done those
in.
either.
So, having memorized a ton of content blocks from my essays using Anki flashcards, what I've now done is, from the 20th of April onwards, I made spider diagrams, one-page diagrams of every single essay. So here's the first one about implicit versus explicit memory. We've done, you know, various topics within memory, cognitive maps, metacognition. And the idea is that we've pretty much got the whole structure of the essay along with the keywords in the spider diagram. So this is the essay about short-term memory versus long-term memory. It starts off with an introduction, then something about single system memory.
So I actually really like this idea, the idea of the spidergram. So I think it's good for the essay, but I think it's good just for each specific piece of content in each class. So let's say you're taking intellectual property. You have copyright, you have trademark, you have trade secret, and you have patents. And so I would even recommend doing a spider diagram for each one of those. So copyright is in the middle of a spider diagram, and you just go based off that for that entire section. But I think that's a great idea.
Then something about the two components. And if we zoom in over here, we see I've written G plus C 1966. And that actually refers to the flashcard over here, where I talk about Glanzer and Kunitz 1966. And in my flashcard, I've got the content blog where I'm describing the experiment, and actually, this is just like a whole paragraph. Another GNC experiment. This G 1972 is Glanzer 1972.
This guy's a machine.
B and H.
He has a system down to a T. He has his spider diagram going straight to his Anki flashcards. Like,
I have all these content
how do
blocks
I get this productive? How do I get this in tune? Please, again, teach me.
And I write G plus C 1966. I know exactly what that refers to. Obviously, I've now forgotten 4 years later, but I used to know exactly what that referred to back in the day. And I've done this for every single one of the 40, 50 essays that I've memorized. We've got our content blocks in Anki. We've memorized them using Anki. We've got our kind of essay structures using spider diagrams.
Okay, let's keep going. Let's keep going.
Active recall. The final piece of the puzzle involves systematic spaced repetition. So how did I decide what I was going to do each day? If you've seen any of my revision videos, you might have come across the idea of the retrospective revision timetable, and that was what I used. I've made a whole video on this.
Retrospective
basically,
timetable.
Actually, I'm just going to show you.
Can't even say it right.
Where are we? Here we go. This was my retrospective revision timetable. So it's split up into section A, section B, and section C. So let's see, implicit versus explicit memory. Here we go. This actually works. So on the 20th of...
And I actually did try to do this last semester, but I got off track because I completely forgot about it, and I just went back to my old ways of studying, and I did not do this. But I think it would really help.
April, I studied implicit versus explicit memory, so I've marked down the date as the 20th of April, and then I've marked down all the various things I did on the 20th of April. And then I think on the 21st I did some of B and C. Yep, so you can see on the 21st of April, when I active recalled these essay plans over here, wherever they are, I've marked them in the retrospective sheet. And then the idea is that the next time I do them, I am marking the date for that, and then I'm color coding it in red, yellow, green, whatever, depending on how well I knew it at the time.
I think that's actually going to be super helpful for spaced repetition, really going to help you memorize what you're trying to learn. And if you can track it, that's great.
So that was an overview of the essay memorization framework that I use to systematically memorize about 45 to 50 different essay plans using a mixture of active recall, spaced repetitions, flashcards, and spider diagrams. And that ended up going quite well for me. In the actual exam, I think about 2/3 of the essay titles out of the, I think, 12 essays we had to write, I think 8 of them were essays that were part of my block of 50. I'd already planned them, so it was pretty easy enough to just regurgitate what I already knew onto the page, which was awesome. But then about a third of them, about 4 of the essays were new. They'd never been asked before. I hadn't predicted them. But because I knew so much about these subjects, like, at the time, if you'd asked me any question at all about, the animal psychology, or if you'd asked me any question at all about IQ or intelligence or personality
knows everything
or short-term memory, long-term memory,
psychology.
or, I don't know, judgment decision-making, I knew so much about those subjects based on memorizing all these essays that it was pretty straightforward to build an essay from scratch in about 10 minutes in the exam. So I would just plan it out using my spider diagram and then regurgitate using my own content blocks from my Anki flashcards, but also just being able to write whatever I wanted because I knew the subject so well.
All right, he did well. He did well. Okay, so overall, I liked it. But I didn't like some parts of it. I think writing that many different plans and essay topics, I think maybe that's different in med school and law school. I think more in law school, you really need to just hit the topics. Like I said over and over and over during that whole video, you need to hit those topics. You don't want to be creative, you don't want to be flashy, but you need to have these things memorized. So I don't really know if I liked the beginning part of Ali's video where he is writing down everything, coming up with ideas of what the test questions might be. I did like that he is going to the professors, asking for old tests, trying to find old tests to really help you out. But the rest of it, I don't know how I feel about that. The second part of actually memorizing it, I think this dude must be super smart. I wish I could memorize all that, and you know what, maybe I can. I haven't done all these strategies, so it's very possible. But I think one thing that he uses for the spaced repetition and active recall is that it's very brain intensive, which sucks, and I think that's why I haven't been able to do it as much. I usually just default back to highlighting and rereading, and it's a little easier, but I guess I'm not learning as much. So overall, I would say these are good tips. I mean, I think I'm going to try to use them this coming semester, but we'll see how it goes. I'll keep you updated, and shout out to Ali Abdaal for the video to review. Thank you.